everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Golden Age podcast. And today is one of the, I've been waiting to do this for so long. Today, I have Rob Hardy with me. Rob, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm
Mm,
really looking forward to our conversation. How are you doing?
dude, I am excited, man. Yeah, just thanks for having me.
Uh,
And I don't know, you sort of picked up on the modern age idea without me ever really talking about it, but it's the
yeah,
thing that I care most about and
yeah.
think about all the freaking time. So I'm so jazzed to talk.
Awesome, awesome. So, speaking of jazz, I studied music and I learned how to play the guitar. And I couldn't help notice that in your background and in your YouTube videos, you have a bunch of guitars in your
Mm,
wall. So, I just thought that we could start
mm.
there. Like, what's your relationship with the guitar?
Oh, that's such a complicated question.
Ooh,
Right
really?
now, my relationship with the guitar is not much. There's not much of a relationship. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because I guess I'll just like go through this like linearly. Guitar basically saved my life, and I don't know, that might be a little hyperbolic, but I was a troubled youth. As a teenager, I got expelled from middle school. I ended up at a boarding school where
Oh,
I was really edgy. I was really like pissed off all the time. I had some, I don't know, my stepdad had died several years earlier. So there's just like lots of anger.
mm,
Um, and I was taking it out on my mom. I was taking it out on other people. And part of that is also just like teenagers
being
are
a teenager. Yeah.
angsty and stupid and just feeling all their shit anyway. And guitar came into my life and I just threw myself at it like relentlessly to the point where I was that kid who was just like locked up in his room all day, like practicing for 8 hours. And like
Yeah.
I'd go to school and like do this stuff. But really what I wanted to do was just go back to my room and play the guitar. And
Yeah.
I was writing things and do like, I don't know, like it was an outlet for all the negative shit I was feeling and going through in my life.
Yeah.
And it gave me a constructive place to put that energy that really kind of pulled me out of a downward spiral
Mhm.
that I was caught in, that really, really turned my life around in a place where it was kind of uncertain where it was kind of uncertain whether I would turn out to be like, I don't know, a sociopath or I don't know,
Mm,
something, I don't know, maybe that's a little, again, hyperbolic, but
mhm.
so the guitar stuck with me like all the way through high school. It was my obsession. I had originally planned on going to school for music production and
Yeah.
a combination of like jazz and music production at the
Mhm.
University of Denver. And essentially, I wasn't good enough. Part of it
Mm,
was that I was entirely self-taught. I wasn't. I don't know. I couldn't necessarily read music that well.
mm,
I couldn't, like, my sense of rhythm wasn't that great. I get lost. I don't know. If be like
mm,
um, jumping into like some improv with people, like I would get lost and couldn't really, I don't know, just like couldn't really like find my place in like proper jazz. So I ended up pivoting to studying film
mm.
in college and just like treating the guitar as like a secondary thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't know, I went on to like do film for a while, and like started a business, like an online business around film.
Hmm.
That's kind of what led to Ungated. Like there's a whole other journey there.
Yeah.
But with guitar, up until maybe like a year or two ago, like it was something I felt really guilty about. It
Mm,
was something I thought I should be still deeply passionate about. Like it was still basically part of my identity. Like I beat myself up a lot for not practicing, not being as good as I once was, not getting, like I've gotten worse over the last 10 years by
yeah.
probably quite a lot. Um, and somewhere along the way, like I stopped enjoying it because I was caught in those mental
Mm,
cycles.
mm,
So part of what's happened over the last year or two is just me giving myself permission to let go of that part of my identity. And
yeah.
it's not that I don't play anymore. It's more that when I do play, it's not from a place of obligation. There's no
Yeah.
heaviness. It's from a place of like, oh, I'm just gonna like bang on this thing and make some noise and sing
Yeah.
badly, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's so interesting because when I had my wrist injury and I changed to corporate training, there were a lot of people that first of all there were a lot of people that asked me how if I didn't feel bad because I just wasted, I don't know, a bunch of years in my life, which makes no sense because music teaches you a lot that goes beyond music. But the second thing was I actually felt that guilt as well because I was enjoying doing corporate training. I was enjoying doing public speaking, and so suddenly, and it's really fun because I too had to go through that journey of like learning again how to build a relationship with the guitar that was based not on being a professional musician, but on being but on having fun playing the guitar, right? And like almost like a non-coercive approach to the guitar, and so that's so interesting. You were playing jazz back then, or you were playing any other?
Not so I love jazz with every fiber of my being, but I am not I am not nearly accomplished enough, and I'm not deep enough into theory,
Mhm.
into like all learning all the standards and like
Yeah,
all of the
yeah,
things that one has to do to be a proper jazz musician. Like
yeah.
I never got to that place, but I
Mhm.
play a lot of folk, a lot of rock, a lot of blues, a
Awesome.
lot of yeah, just like and I don't know. I went back the other day, not the other day, maybe like a week ago, and found my old SoundCloud from
Mm.
when I was like 17 years old. Um, and it's kind of sloppy and badly recorded
Yeah.
and all that, but like there's some really interesting stuff there. That's like
Hmm.
real. I don't know. You probably know like Joe Satriani type
Yeah.
stuff. Like it's very kind of virtuosic, but like
Hmm.
really interesting and dreamy and like layered,
Hmm.
and me playing with like harmony and like all sorts of cool things. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I don't know. Like for a while there, I was kind of doing my own thing,
Yeah.
but
So
these days
that's
it's mostly just like folk songs.
yeah, that's awesome. Like, and those were your original songs in that
Mhm.
SoundCloud. Awesome. So you've been putting like because there's almost like this relationship. It seems that you started to put out content, even though a different kind of content, but really soon. How? Why did you do that? Like, was there any need to share something, or it was just fun and
Honestly, I think a lot of that early stuff that I put out was only there because I enrolled in like the online version of the Berklee School of Music,
mm-hmm,
and did a few different classes, and like
mm,
some were in Ableton Live, one was in jazz, one was like
mm,
um and having a SoundCloud or having these things uploaded to the internet was like a prerequisite to be able to do stuff.
yeah,
So I think I uploaded most of that like as an accident, just
mm,
because, or not
yeah.
as an accident, like, but for a completely separate reason other
Mm.
than like I'm gonna make content, I'm gonna put myself out there.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with to talk a little bit about Ungate and Ungated. And of course, I want to ask you what's a modern golden age to you, and like how
Mm,
you see that relationship, and then we'll go full in. But first, I do want to ask you a very specific question, which is like
yes.
I follow a bunch of newsletters, websites, and Oasis around the internet, which from someone who's hearing this and don't understand what Oasis mean, Rob will explain it. I'm sure because he has an amazing course called Oasis Building 101. But I follow a bunch of these newsletters and websites and all that stuff. But man, you have the most beautiful visuals that I've ever laid my hands on. Like and they there's like this line that it's always like the same style. And I was wondering like are those originals? Are those from a specific artist? Like tell me a little bit about that.
Oh my god. Okay, so this is maybe like the happiest accident that has ever happened to me, because I used to just use kind of the same generic like Unsplash or like Pexels images, just royalty free
Yeah.
images that everybody. Um, and it was when I was doing I went through Ship 30 about I don't know, a year or two ago, and I was like, I need something that will like where I don't spend like an hour trying to find the right image, because I was always really
Mm-hmm.
picky about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I stumbled across this guy on Unsplash, So they're royalty-free images. His name is J.R. Corpa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what he does. He has that really captivating abstract style, or it's kind of like, I don't even know how you describe it, but it's like
Yeah.
really vivid, and there's like little paint splashes, and he juxtaposes colors and really, but they're all very distinct,
Mm-hmm.
distinctly him, and they just have a distinct vibe to him. And I fell in love, and he's got hundreds of these images for freely available on Unsplash. So it's my secret weapon. Like,
Yeah.
it's like the single best branding choice I have ever made, is just to
Yeah.
use this guy's images.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't want to tell anybody about him, but like,
Yeah.
it's amazing
Well,
because,
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, I was just going to say, because I think a lot about how can I create a place that feels different,
Mm-hmm.
that feels, yeah, I don't even have the right word for it, but
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm always thinking about how to differentiate myself from the people. Yeah, I don't know, from everybody else. This ties into the Oasis question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like, so I don't know. We could just go into that.
Yeah.
Like, in Oasis, if you take the metaphor literally, it's a, a place that is nurturing and safe and delightful, and that meets your needs in a landscape that is surrounded by just like terrible barren nothingness, for lack of a
Mm-hmm.
better way of putting it, that's surrounded by a content desert. And I think about this in the, like, transposing that over to the, like, to the internet and the content and the creator landscape. And so much of what's out there is so boring, is so predictable, is so soul sucking, is so kind of like manipulative, and like, I don't know, it'll just be adjectives from here on out, or just like the same word. But it's one of those things that I just have an intuitive sense at this point that I don't want that. And I think that's always been there for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I started my first business, called Filmmaker Freedom in 2015, at the time I was writing for a filmmaking blog called No Film School. But what No Film School was, or still is basically, is like kind of like the filmmakers version of BuzzFeed, just kind of like really cheap articles with a lot of like really clickbait headlines. It's all ad driven, so you really need to get in as much ad or as many page views as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it all felt so soulless, kind of like a lot of the internet did. And there was a drive for me to go and build something different that felt deeper, that explored the things that I cared about. Like, at the time, like, everybody in the filmmaking community was obsessed with gear, the latest cameras, the latest lights, all these fancy lenses. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same in music land. People getting obsessed with all of the various toys.
Yeah.
um, but I wanted to talk about the craft, the soul of cinematography, the just like the mindset of being a filmmaker, like all of these various creative blocks that prevent us from doing like
Mm-hmm.
work that matters, which it's wild to me that that's still kind of like the driving force of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of set off on my own with a goal to do that. And over the course of like 4 or 5 years that I was working on that business, I had, I don't know, it felt like once or twice a week at least, somebody would reach out and be like, man, I just stumbled into your world and it feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels so different from everything I'm used to
Mm-hmm.
in this ecosystem. And people would say, like, I just want to stay here. I just want to live here. And like, that was sort of like the, oh shit, like what this is an Oasis moment for me. I think I just did it intuitively at first, but over the year, especially over the last 2 years, as I've really like thought about that and made that more concrete,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I've tried to distill into more of a strategy. But like, ultimately what it is a place on the internet that is fueled by what you most care about and your curiosity and the things that you want to say, the things that are true to you, without you playing by all the bullshit rules of the content landscape,
Yeah.
the internet marketing landscape. And it's a place where people who are like you, once quote unquote, find the others, will come, and it will feel like home to them. It will
Mm-hmm.
feel like a place that they want to live on the internet, because it is so different, because it is so nerdy and interesting and deep, by somebody who clearly cares and wants to be there and isn't just following some soulless best practices. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just ask you a question? Like, what made you want to actually go that way and go against all those bullshit rules instead of just going with the flow? Because it's easier to go
Mhm.
with the flow, right? It's easier to get
Yeah.
like, to do the clickbaity and that kind of articles. And like, what were your internal motivations to just go against that current?
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that has kind of happened in phases.
Mm,
Because like it's always been driven by intuition, like a
mm,
sense of having done things a traditional way and then felt really out of alignment is maybe the
mm,
best way of putting it. Always feeling like I was forcing myself, always feeling like it was an obligation. It was something I didn't want to do, but kind of had to, which just led to all sorts of unnecessary, I don't know, suffering is a heavy word, but like it applies is when you're
yeah.
just spending your days trying to like force yourself to do things that you know are not true to you and that you know are not meaningful or good or true.
Yeah.
So like when I left film school originally, it was a sense of intuition of like I just don't want to be here. I have to build something because if I stay like and the money was good too. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the crazy thing looking back on it is like I had a really sweet ride doing easy work that paid really well, but it killed my soul. And
Yeah.
so I like made the leap into starting my own thing. And the funny thing is though, like when I started my own thing, it came with a lot of like financial like scarcity and
Yeah.
insecurity
Of course.
that pushed me back into a lot of best practices
Mm.
that like and that's one of the that's the big reason that Ungated now is so focused on avoiding a lot of this stuff is because I spent 4 or 5 years like deeply doing all the best practices of online marketing and really trying to make them work and always feeling shitty about them.
Mm.
Um, and it wasn't until the pandemic and like the lockdowns that I had another one of those oh shit moments where it's like
Mm.
this if I keep going down this path, like I am not ever going to feel how I want to feel. I'm not going to do work that matters. Like I'm just trying to force it again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at this point, like I'm I don't know exactly how to like frame what my internal state was other than I know this pattern now
Mm.
of being in a place of sort of like scarcity and like falling into needing best practices because they give you a sense of control, they give you a sense of security in kind
Yeah.
of a chaotic world.
Yeah.
But I know how much it kills my soul when I follow that path.
Yeah.
I know how much it limits me, and I know that if I do that again, it will lead me to a place that I don't want to be. So lately I've just been exploring and playing around from a place of like, I don't know exactly how it is that I want to show up in the world yet, but I know how
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to feel. So yeah, more than anything, it's that, right? It's not wanting to go back to a pain that I have experienced
Yeah.
numerous times.
Yeah. So how did you develop that? If you develop like that self-awareness of being
Mm.
able to like because it to me it sounds like your North Star is almost like this intuitive feeling. Like have
Yeah.
you how did you develop that?
Yeah. I don't know if it was on purpose. I mean, I read
Mm.
a shit ton of like personal development books and whatever all through my
Mhm.
20s, as one does. And all of them are like, you should have more self-awareness. And like, I don't know, maybe I picked something up
Mm.
somewhere along the way, but um, yeah, I don't, and that's the interesting thing is like, I I don't know how self-aware I was like prior to the pandemic. Like there was obviously
Mm.
something there. There was
Mhm.
always an intuitive sense of various things, but there was something about like the pandemic and the lockdowns for me that really was just a giant
Yeah.
pattern interrupt.
Yeah.
And I've had this conversation with so many people. Like it was a global,
Absolutely.
yeah. And it woke a lot of people up and put them
Mm.
on new paths and got them questioning their lives up to that point. And like,
Mhm.
I think, I think probably in like 5 years or 10 years, we'll look back at the pandemic and the lockdowns as some sort of like turning point.
Yeah, absolutely.
towards a healthier world. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So let me just ask you a question, going a little bit back about Oasis. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about your content is that you practice what you preach. And what I mean by that is that if anyone opens Ungated, they'll not find like this, do these 5 tricks to get whatever, right? It
Yeah.
just doesn't happen like that. But I do want to ask you, like, if because people should definitely do, everyone that's trying to have like this presence, online presence, should do Oasis Building 101. And I was wondering, like, if you let's say that let's imagine that I didn't do it yet. Like,
Mm.
for me, what's in it for me if I want to do the course? Like, just tell us a little bit what the course is about, and what are
Mm.
some, I didn't want to say like the 3 things that will help you build like Oasis, but like, what's in it for the course and why people should just do it.
Yeah. Well, so that might require a little bit of a step back.
Go
I
ahead.
frame I frame Ungated, like its tagline, as the missing instruction manual for 1,000 true fans. And I assume most people are familiar with it, but it's essentially
Yeah.
the idea that to make a living as a creative person, you don't need to reach millions. You don't need to be at a massive scale. You just need to find 1,000 people who are diehard fans of your work, and have some sort of economic model where they pay you directly. Because usually for creatives, there's like layers of like middlemen, and there's like wild bureaucracies and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's about having a direct relationship with your fans and having a deep relationship with your fans. And the underlying promise there is that you don't necessarily need to sell out. You don't need to please the masses. You don't need to shave off your rough edges, or like the things that you believe that are maybe a little bit weird or out there, or that are like really alive for you, that probably most of the world doesn't believe in. Because like that's what has to happen if you want to succeed in the traditional models. You have to be inoffensive, for lack of a better way of putting it. With the 1,000 true fans model, what makes it work is the depth of the relationship, is the fact that you are unlike everybody else out there, that you're not just some lookalike copy and paste like creative person who's making inoffensive work, but you are doing things that are uniquely true and alive and vibrant for you. Because you can bet your ass that there are 1,000 people, or I don't know, it might be 10,000 people, it might be 500. Like, it's 1,000 is an arbitrary number, but they're like based on the fact that the entire world is networked together now. We're not constrained by geography. Like, the entire world and all of their weird interests are networked together in this way, where we can be our weirdest selves and find those people who really vibe with it, do work that matters to us, be connected to people who really see us and cherish us for who we are, and make our living that way. Like, build a flourishing life that isn't constrained by a lot of the dumb bullshit that sort of gets in the way of creatives actually feeling how they want to feel.
Yeah.
Which is, connective and doing work that matters and doing work that lights them up. Like, so that's, I don't know, that's broadly the spiel, and that's the benefit, right? And the Oasis is just like one frame for how to do that.
Yeah.
It's like a recipe maybe, or it's like a way to think about the problem. Because a lot of people come at it like, how do I make 1,000 true fans? And they end up doing a lot of these marketing best practices. They're like, oh, I just have to put out content 3 times a day on Twitter. I have to write threads because that's what gets attention. Yada yada yada. But the Oasis idea is simple. It's to build the corner of the internet that you want for yourself, that you would feel at home in. It feels like a container that you want to spend your time and go deep into all your weird interests and make the kind of art that wouldn't ever fit into any kind of, and I use the word art loosely.
Yeah.
Like, it could be anything. But make the things that would never fit into those best practices, those templates, those like, just follow this process and you'll get such and such result. By making the things that feel alive to you, you attract the people who are, and that, yeah, you attract people who like that. And like that's the thing, is like that's how you create true fans, not by doing the same dumb bullshit as everybody else, but by being yourself. And I hate saying that because it sounds cheeky and like just be yourself, man. Like,
Mm,
but there is something there about like following your intuitive sense, about following where your curiosity goes instead of just like playing it safe and looking
yeah,
for easy answers and best practices.
yeah.
And I think it
It,
comes back to self-awareness, by the way. Like if you've been through the course, so you know like what I do in like literally every course is have people
mhm,
explore through free writing or free speaking, or
mhm,
like I give people points to explore their inner world
yeah,
and to see what's there, because that's ultimately what leads you to these places,
yeah.
not external answers, but the ones that are already within you.
Yeah, that's like one of the things that I really liked about your course, and that really stuck in my head was like this idea of um, your your strategy to create an oasis should be something along the lines of acting on your values or then committing to be the change that you want to see. And I remember thinking about that and thinking, well, that's really different from what I'm used to listening in marketing courses, because it makes me it forces me to think, to really think about, well, what are my values, like what do I want people to associate with me when they come into my webpage, when they come into my work, when they listen to this podcast. And so it's a, yeah, it ties back again to self-awareness, because it's a very distinct way of developing the self-awareness in terms of specifically how you want to show up on the internet. And it's awesome. And one of the things that I really enjoyed also about your work, and moving a little bit from Oasis to Ungated, and I really enjoy it. Like, you have this article that says that talks about the principles, your business principles. Like, you have like these 8 principles, and I'm going to ask you specifically. So they are. I'm just going to read them out loud. So they are: play the long game, simplify or die, don't be a commodity, default to generosity, make friends, have fun, create happy customers, experiment and iterate, and embrace the messy middle. And I remember the first time that I look at those, I was like, those weren't the principles that I was expecting. Because once again, because that's why I like you so much. Because everything that you put out is way different than what of my previous mindset of what I was expecting when coming into a website or in that talks about marketing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about these principles and how did you come up with them? And if you have like any of them that you value more than the others.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. I think I wrote that article about a year ago. It was probably, I don't know, April or May of 2021. And I still I still broadly adhere to those principles. Like and so this is interesting. I think I'm always trying to like come up with a map for myself, because like broadly what I do at Ungated, or I have been doing, is just exploring. Like it's a very, yeah, it's essentially me admitting that I don't like the status quo of
Mm-hmm.
online business, online marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and being like, yo, I don't know what a better way forward is yet. But I know how I want to feel in the world. I know how I want to show up. I know that if I'm not showing up as myself, adhering to my values, then whatever I'm doing is not worth it. Like I would rather just get like a day job um, than just be sort of like a generic creator who's doing it out of a place of like obligation and just doing it because that's what works. Because I've
Mm-hmm.
done that and it feels like a prison to me. Like it feels suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one way to answer the question you just asked is that most of those principles are the polar opposite of how I used to operate. Um, so I don't know. We'll take one of them for example, is like experiment and iterate. For me, like I've since reframed this as bottom up, like building businesses from the bottom up instead of the top down.
Yeah.
But the way I used to operate in the world was trying to think myself into the best answers, the best strategy. It was about consuming as much as possible to give myself that security blanket of knowing that I had all the best information and the best strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go and like build these meticulous business systems, like it was like big landing pages or like 10,000 word blog posts that would lead into like these epic email sequences that would then
Mm-hmm.
lead to like some sort of, you know, like automated backend with like a sales page and
Yeah.
like all the things, right? Because that's what I saw people in sort of the space doing, and then I wanted to do it better because
Mm-hmm.
like I have that kind of thing is like I don't really like how they're doing it, but I am going to go better and I'm going to deliver more value and so on. And the thing that I experienced over and over and over and over is that whenever I build some complex system, I pour a ton of time into planning and building something that I think is like exquisite and detailed and cool.
Mm-hmm.
It never works in the real world. Like reality always just like kicks me square in the dick.
Yeah.
And it's like, ha ha ha, Rob, you haven't learned this lesson yet, so you're gonna feel more pain. Yeah, suck it, loser. And I legitimately stayed trapped in that kind of pattern for years because it, like we talked about, it kind of comes from a place of insecurity. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know, I'd be filled with self-doubt, so I would go like look for information, and then I would kind of keep a lot of my work to myself and build these systems and keep learning in the background because it's scary to actually interact with the real world. It's
Yeah.
vulnerable to put out your work and your ideas and face potential criticism and pushback, or to hear that you're not as smart as you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I did that for years and years and years. And that was one of those things that the pandemic, for whatever reason, and being forced into lockdown just to like have way too much time to think, it was
Yeah.
like, oh shit, I cannot keep operating this way. And so like that's where the bottom, like, so broadly speaking, that old way of operating was top down.
Yeah.
It was trying to exert as much control over like a complex system as
Yeah.
possible. And to do it through like proper strategy and proper planning and just trusting that if you execute on the plan, you will succeed.
Which sorry to interrupt, but which in itself is like it's designed to fail because complex systems have too many variables, right? There's this awesome talk, and I don't remember the guy's name, but I'll look into it and then add it in the links of this the description. Which is like he talks about how we should reframe how we think about when we're trying to solve problems that deal with complex systems, thinking in terms of success and failure is basically designed to ruin the project, because when you think about that, you'll optimize to a specific result that may not even be the best result in that system. And
Yeah.
he proposed something like along the lines of thinking about how healthy or unhealthy is a given endeavor into a system, and that makes so much sense, at least for me, which I relate with this strategy of approaching to healthy versus unhealthy. I relate that with bottom up approach, right? And so and go ahead and explain people how what
Yeah.
is bottom up approach.
Yeah. Well, bottom up is basically what you just said. Like you still set out in a specific direction. Like that's sort of a prerequisite for all this. You kind of want to know vaguely where you're going.
Yeah.
Move towards something that is meaningful for you. But then instead of throwing all your energy into finding the right answers and building the perfect plan and sort of like being in the background and all of that, you kind of have to take a leap of faith into the world. And I use that phrase leap of faith in a like this is maybe the thing that ties together so much of what I'm doing on Ungated, is that all of it is scary and unintuitive. And so when I say take a leap of faith with bottom up, like you have to let go of the need to have all of the answers. You have to let go of the need to know the exact path. You have to surrender your need to control everything.
Yeah.
And it's just an unintuitive way of being in the world. But like once you do that, you can approach this entire problem from a place of curiosity and play and intuition. And so what, like this, it comes back to experimentation, like experiment and iterate, right? Like I think bottom up is just like maybe like a a bigger container for that. But what it really means is to go interact with the world, to listen to what your intuition is telling you is meaningful. Like, what's an exciting next step? What's a little bit scary as a next step? How can you go actually into the world and play with it? Instead of, because like top down is very like all or nothing. Like it's like you either succeed or fail. You're either sticking to your plan or you're fucking up. But bottom up, it's just going out into the world and fucking around and finding out and seeing what happens. It's jumping into the world and actually experiencing reality. And that's the thing, right? By doing that a lot, by running lots of little experiments and trying things and seeing how it goes and interacting with the real world, instead of just trying to find all the answers in your head, you get so much real data about how, not only like how the world actually works in all of its glorious complexity, but how that makes you feel. Because like, this is another thing I learned from like my first business, the filmmaking business, is that there were all sorts of things that I thought would make me feel great. Like a business model, right? It's like so many online businesses operate based on like launch cycles. So they'll run like 3 or 4 launches a year. They're these really big, high profile events. And since everybody's doing it, you just kind of assume like, this is how it's done. I will feel happy once I am successfully executing this model. And I did it for a couple of years and it sucked. Like it was fucking terrible. Like launches are absurdly high pressure. They're so stressful, not to mention the fact that this model keeps you in sort of like this feast or famine mode. And if a launch doesn't happen to work, it throws you into famine mode. And I had a few launches that didn't work as well as I thought. Like, this is a very tangible example of like building these complex systems, these complex launch sequences and doing all these marketing things. And like, then for it just to like not work for whatever reason is soul crushing. And so like, it just did not contribute to me having a good life. Like it heightened my sense of financial insecurity and my, like all of these things I didn't want to feel. It led me to being really stressed, pushing me into these sort of like phases of like burnout and then like finally getting back to it and then burning out again. Like is not a good life. But when you're operating from the bottom up, like you can go test out a launch, maybe 2 launches and see how it goes. But if you are approaching it from this frame of like iteration and seeing how it actually feels, you can make that call where it's like, yo, launches do not feel good to me. Like they don't contribute to the kind of business that I want to run. They don't make me feel how I want to feel. This is not what my good life, my fulfilled life looks like. I'm going to go try something else now. Instead of just staying stuck in this like abusive pattern where you're doing the same thing as everybody else. And like over time, you end up just experimenting and iterating your way into something that looks like nothing else that's out there, because, you know, everybody's going to take their unique path through this very, very complex world. And you're going to end up with something that actually feels good to you, that feels intuitively correct. It's operating in a way that isn't stuck to best practices, but is fueled by what you think is intuitively worthwhile and good. And like, that's it, man.
It's almost fun because I was listening to you and it's curious that you mentioned leap of faith, because I think that the biggest difference from those 2 approaches is like the feeling of freedom that you have. Like when you think about stuff from a bottom up perspective, you're free to actually be who you want to be and change and admit that right now, today I want to be this, but tomorrow I may be something different. And when you think about it in the top down, as you say, it's like you get stuck in that specific framework, that structure, and that's who you are and what you want to be, and changing. And it's funny because you mentioned like the expression leap of faith. Have you seen there's this animated Spider-Man movie? I don't know if you have seen it. I don't know.
I haven't, I don't think.
Oh, I'm not a very big fan of superheroes, but you definitely need to see this movie because it's about this kid, and I try not to spoil it too much. It's about this kid who, his name is Miles Morales, so he's not the typical Spider-Man, but he gets the powers from a Spider-Man, and he suddenly understands that there's a lot of Spider-Mans around, and all of them are different. And he's and the whole movie to me is the process of him embracing the kind of Superman that he is instead
Yes.
of all the others. And it's so funny because it's one of my favorite movie scenes ever. It comes from that movie, and it's called The Leap of Faith, which is the moment where he decides. I'm getting chills talking about it because
Yes.
it's a moment where he decides that I'm not going to be like the typical Spider-Man. I'm going to be my Spider-Man. And he comes from this neighborhood. And so instead of having like this typical suit, he puts the Woody on, and he has like, and instead of just going around with webs, he kind of parkours at the same time. And so like, I believe that having like this bottom up approach is like, it's basically having the freedom to express who you are instead, and get somewhere instead of trying to get somewhere by almost like limiting yourself to who you think you are, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that the major difference may be that one, like the freedom that you get. I don't know if this makes sense to you, but
Dude, you just made so much fucking sense. Like, I want to watch this movie, and
yeah,
it feels so aligned with everything we're talking about here.
yeah,
Like, because like I don't know, this might be a good transition into this idea of golden ages,
yeah,
but I come from like a firm belief that every human is imbued with both innate gifts and like learned gifts, and there are these things that we are uniquely capable of, this unique like we're all this unique rich tapestry of perspectives and experiences and gifts and whatever that we could uniquely bring into the world.
yeah,
But like, we live in this system largely defined by like the industrial area that's sort of like carried through. It's in our school system. It's how we like typically do jobs and all of that, that forces, I don't know, that basically conditions us to be cogs in the machine, for lack of a
mm-hmm,
better way of putting it.
mm-hmm,
So like, part of what I want to do with, and like, it's fascinating to see how that's translated over to the creator economy as well. This thing that is ostensibly about freedom and about doing great creative work and about mattering and being yourself, but there's still something there that keeps so many people limited and trapped in very narrow ways of being. So like, part of like the goal of Ungated is, and it like, ungated kind of means like, like opening the gate. Like, there's
yeah,
a bunch of, but it's freeing yourself in these various ways.
mm,
It's about understanding, like, and like, it's like, I'm hesitant to get into like the word spiritual, but
mm,
like, there is something like, there is something core to the experience of humanity, something beautiful about the human spirit, that when it's unchained, it can do beautiful things. And I
mm-hmm,
like that is at the heart of what this is it's not necessarily like, here's how you build a business on the internet,
yeah,
because like, there's a ton of those fucking places. It's about a new way of being in the world, that fundamentally, I don't know, like, I'm just wary of like sounding
no, please go ahead,
like,
like,
yeah, but like, like opening up what's there and letting your light shine. Like, it
mm-hmm,
sounds tacky to me, but like, that's what it is. Like, I believe there is something beautiful at the core of all of us, that if we really took the time to explore and be in the world. And it's not an answer that you can think yourself to
mm-hmm,
into. Like, most of
mm-hmm,
us have to go into the world and be a little bit awkward and uncomfortable and try
mm-hmm,
things and try on new ways of being, and get feedback and continuously explore ourselves to really like understand what our gift is, what our dharma is. Like, I'm reading this
yeah,
book right now about it's like translating the Bhagavad Gita into sort of, I don't know, Paul Millard recommended it on Twitter the other day.
mm,
Amazing. But like, there is something there that I believe that collectively, like,
mm-hmm,
as more people opt out of like the industrialized like sameness, and sort of like start opening themselves up and exploring and connecting with people who are like them, and like, this is how you start that spiral up, the dominoes toppling into a golden age. Is
yeah,
it doesn't come from, some like top down institution. Like, there's no government that's going to usher us into a golden age. Like, it's a
yeah,
revolution that's born out in the soul of every person. It's an awakening
mm-hmm,
that happens there, that then like spirals out
Yeah.
into our families, into our relationships, into our communities. And you layer in the internet on top of this and our ability to reach anyone anywhere. And like, I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but
No,
like
but
it's fucking big, man.
yeah, but it makes total sense because I also believe that because there was a moment before I started the podcast where I thought to myself, like, I have to have this very clear vision of what a modern golden age is. Because here I am trying to make a podcast about it, so I should know what I'm talking about, right? And then after a while, I realized, well, no, because if I bring like this very fixed version of what I think it's a modern goal, that will be against the principles that I believe will apply in a modern golden age, which is freedom, which is co-constructing something, which is sharing, which is mutual building something, right? And so, however, I do believe there are some things, some principles that will allow us to get in there. And it's funny because I talked with Norman Chile on the first episode of the podcast, and he talked about how we lack the infrastructure as governments and the relationship between governments and individuals to actually get to a modern golden age. And that makes sense, but I do believe that will come after this first revolution, this first internal revolution that you're talking about. And I think that starts with embracing spirituality. And when we talk about spirituality, we're not talking about like having a religion or like I had like this priest. It's so funny because I talked with him today. Like I had this priest that completely changed the way I looked at religion and spirituality, because he like I was raised Catholic, and so I was going to the church, and in the mass, like I was used to listen to these priests that all sounded the same. And I remember this guy coming in for the first time and saying things like, there's people who will never put their feet inside of the church and will go to heaven way faster than most of you that are here. And I remember him saying that, and I was like, what? What? Huh? What? And I remember talking with him, and he explained to me that like spirituality is something that goes beyond religion. It's about it's about your connection with, and this is my words, not them, but I believe that spirituality is your connection with love. And we have all these crazy definitions about love, and maybe some of them are right. I do believe that there's this universal love. And personally, I believe that we can get into a modern golden age if we tap into that. And maybe universal love to me is something that it's probably not the same to you, but there will be some shared characteristics that will make us connect. And it's scary that you're saying that you were hesitating in talking about that, and that's because I believe that sometimes what happens is like we're used to associate spirituality with these woohoo things or like God and all these institutions. And I personally believe that spirituality it's about love and loving not only others but ourselves, and that's definitely one of the principles for a modern golden age, right?
Yeah. Dude, you just said it better than I could. I think so. I think like that's exactly how I am conceptualizing spirituality at this point. Like, is it like the reason I'm turned off is just I look around and I see the people who classify themselves as spiritual, and it's an aesthetic. They're like, look at me doing all this astrology, or like I'm a witch. Look at my tarot cards or whatever. Like, and like I bought a tarot deck a while ago, and I think it's an interesting tool for like self-discovery, but that's a different conversation. But like there's a lot of really cringy shit that comes with that label. And I think the reason I'm hesitant to use it, actually there's two reasons. One is like I went all the way through my 20s as kind of a like atheist isn't the right word. But just holding that belief that, like religion and the trappings of organized religion are responsible for like a lot of the ills in the world, and like yada yada. It's a very Western 20 something like perspective that you pick up out of college and whatever else. So I had this sort of like scornful yeah, I was vaguely scornful towards it.
Mm.
So it's interesting because I just like I don't know, I turned 31 this year, but like it's another one of those things that the pandemic, and again, I think a lot of it comes from like thinking about this idea of leaps of faith
Mm-hmm.
and surrendering to something
Mm-hmm.
that almost requires the architecture of spirituality in the way that you defined it,
Mm.
about like loving yourself and trusting yourself and knowing that whatever you are at your core, like you call it the self, like deep down this essence is
Mm-hmm.
the same as the essence of everyone and
Yeah.
everything around you. And if you can learn to tap into that and love that, you can, like, it's so much easier to make those leaps of faith into the world
Yeah.
because you're fundamentally already safe, you're already loved,
Mm-hmm.
and you're already, yeah, like, so there's something there. But it's, I don't know, like the other reason I'm kind of a little just hesitant about it is like it comes from my marketing brain,
Mm.
knowing that the people I'm trying to reach and like the types of
Mm.
creators I want to pull into my fold are very
Mm.
likely similar to me. Like a lot of them come from sort of maybe similar backgrounds, or who think about religion and spirituality in the same kind of like skeptical, maybe even scornful way.
Yeah.
And who, when they look around like the internet and they see people who classify themselves as spiritual, they just like roll their eyes because it
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of cringy shit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just like a hesitancy to use that label
Yeah.
because of the stories that people already have in their heads about
Yeah.
what the label
We
means.
need a new
But
word, right?
there's something there, that essence of self that is extended out to everything. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we definitely need a new word, right? Like something that describes that feeling without the history that we associate with the world, with the word spirituality and spiritual and all that stuff. Definitely, that's something I'll look into. That, like finding like this random ancient word that maybe describe that feeling without all that story. That's awesome, and it's funny because it's only doing that and making this segue into because I think that you somehow, but I don't know if you want to add to this. Like, do you think that you already described what the modern golden age is to you throughout our conversation, or do you want to put it in a more specific, concrete?
Mm. Yeah, I think I'm in your camp in that I'm wary to be really specific about what I mean. Although, like, what I will say is that if we buy into this sort of like bottom up approach,
Mhm.
part of what that I can do bottom up in how I approach creating my own sort of definition of a golden age.
Yeah.
But that also comes with a bunch of other people who have, slightly different ideas doing it themselves, and groups of people exploring it in different ways. And like that's like part of the beauty of this whole bottom up thing,
Mhm.
is that it's collective and collaborative.
Mhm.
um, and that we're all driving at something a little bit different, but our work will interact in ways that, slightly, I don't know exactly what I'm getting at, other than like this collective, collaborative, bottom up pushing towards something that
Mhm.
no one of us can necessarily can control or envision,
Mhm.
but collectively there will be some sort of emergence between us,
Yeah.
that will look nothing like any specific vision, but will, collectively get us to where we want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
That
yeah.
that makes a little sense. Were you going to add anything?
Yeah, just like, I think a lot about this as being like domain specific, I guess, is like I'm not necessarily thinking how can we create a golden age for all of humanity that encompasses every nation, that encompasses like how we reform the nation state, and how we govern ourselves better, and how
Mm-hmm.
we solve like financial insecurity across the globe, and
Mm-hmm.
like because I think all of that can be encompassed in what we mean by humanity's golden age.
Yeah.
My focus mainly is unlocking the power of the creative spirit and
Mm.
unleashing it upon the internet,
Yeah.
knowing that the internet is going to have all of these network effects and emergent effects that will affect the real world, like the physical
Mm-hmm.
meat space world, in different ways, especially once people are unleashed to say what they think and really be who they are, breaking out of some of like these old industrial ways of being into something that is a bit more spiritual,
Yeah.
that is a bit more connected and interconnected and built on love instead of fear, and like all of these things. But I'm focusing my efforts right now on that one particular domain. And it's funny, it's like I'm using this 1,000 true fans thing kind of as a Trojan horse. Like, again, it's a marketing thing. I know that people are really attracted to that idea, but what I'm essentially doing is instilling a new set of values, a new way of being in the world, that once these creators who all operate in like different niches and different subcultures, like they are going to go out into their little corners of the internet that I will never have influence over, but they will.
Yeah.
And they are going to be models for new ways of acting in the world. They will demonstrate new ways of being that are disconnected from like the broken status quo of what came before. And who the hell knows who that will inspire, and the ripple effects that will have across the internet. So
and that makes a little sense, because thinking about like a modern golden age based on how can we eradicate poverty and do all those stuff, that would be thinking about modern golden age from top-down approach, right? And what we're doing is basically the opposite. So we want to do that, and it's funny because it's so funny that you mentioned values, because when I was thinking about I need to have like this clear vision of what a modern golden age is, I let go of that idea and I embraced like this one, which is like I want to discover what are some of the values, goals, beliefs, and practices that we may share that will allow us to get there. I don't know what that is, but I know that if I talk with different people from all these different corners around the internet, basically, I'll definitely, I think maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I think I'll start to see patterns, and I can then point out those patterns to other people and say, look, I've talked with a bunch of people about this, and like most of them talk about being free to be yourself, for instance, or most of them talk about I don't know, connecting with people that are somehow share your interests, and I believe that once we understand like what are those patterns, and then just come to the internet, because basically I believe that we'll start there and say, look, here are some of them, then we can have like this ripple effect that you're talking about, and it will then get into that modern golden age. Because once again, I don't think that we'll get there by having like this crystal clear vision of what it is, but like a crystal clear need to bring some kind of change into specific environments that can then have a ripple effect on other environments and creating like this bigger change. So that's definitely something that we're aligned with. And it's funny, just going back a little bit, because you were talking about like having this approach. It's you need to believe that you don't need to believe, but it's easier if you believe that you're already like encompassed in this self-love, and that your own true being will be able to face the challenges and the things that are happening. But that's the correct approach, and that takes me to like this last article that you published, which is called Non-coercive Marketing. And I was talking with you a little bit about this before we started, because like there was a moment when I was teaching, just a little bit of backstory, when I was doing all these courses and these coaching sessions and all those corporate training stuff, I was really focused on how can you improve your performance, and most of the times that was related to how can you make sure that almost every emotion that you're feeling is positive and you're dealing with that. And so people created this fake version of me where I didn't feel negative emotions at all. And what happened was, and I admit that in an article that I wrote, that I kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed that lie because it made me feel special, right? But the truth is, I'm not like that. I feel bad emotions as well. And there was a moment where I realized that I need to learn how to express this. And that's when I first realized that I still have very it is difficult for me to share vulnerability. And so what I did was I realized, well, I need to understand people that I admire. How do they do that? How do they share that vulnerability? And I had Danny Miranda on the show, and I don't know if you know him. He's a podcaster. He's a very cool dude. And recently he shared that he was struggling with sports betting. And I remember
Yeah.
that seeing that tweet made me realize, oh look, Danny has problems and he has the courage to admit that. And so when I was reading your non-coercive marketing piece, you start that piece by telling your own origin story. And so I was just, I'll pass you the
Mm.
ball and let you talk about it. But just by first saying that, I really admired what you did in that piece. And from someone who's trying to learn how to be more vulnerable, it really helped me out into having a bunch of conversations after reading your article. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm talking about like yesterday and today, I had some deep conversations being
Mhm.
vulnerable, and your article definitely helped me with that. But I'll let you
Mm.
talk and tell the people what you say in that article.
Well, first off, just like props to you, man, for like going. And so I guess I'll talk about that article in a second, but I'm so captivated by this idea right now that courage is contagious. Um,
Mm,
I went on this like weird little retreat, just like intuitively, maybe like a month ago. That like it was an emotional processing retreat. It was up in Vermont, and it involved a lot of shit that I was uncomfortable with. Like the entire retreat was basically shit that I was uncomfortable with. And then like a couple things in particular, like somatic emotional work.
mm,
So like really feeling into your body because I'm usually up in my head
yeah.
intellectualizing things. Doing things like ecstatic dance.
Yeah, yeah,
That
I
was the
was
thing
talking
that,
about
yeah,
that's awesome.
scared the shit out of me. But the thing that I took away from that retreat is that like, I guess there are a couple things. Like one of them is that every time I jumped into the arena, so to speak, and just sort of did the thing that I thought was uncomfortable and anxiety inducing and scary, I felt great. Like there was a sense of aliveness and self respect and maybe even joy that came from that. Like after the first like 2 minutes of feeling awkward at ecstatic dance, it just felt fucking great to be like flailing around and
Yeah,
doing all sorts of crazy movement,
yeah,
like letting the music flow through you. And there was something there that I had never felt before, that I had never allowed I'd never allowed myself to go there. There was always something
mm,
in the way. But once
mm.
I took that leap of faith, there was there was just like an entire emotional world there for me
Mhm.
that I now have to explore. Like there's still a lot there for me.
Yeah.
And the other thing from that retreat was the courage is contagious thing, right? Is like when you're in an ecosystem where everybody is kind of on their edge, doing uncomfortable thing, taking their own little leaps outside of their comfort zone, like it raises your baseline level of courage. And
Yeah.
especially when everybody is like kind of loving towards one another and
Mm.
encouraging, so like actually giving each other courage and lifting each other up, like it's just an experience unlike anything else I've ever had. And I brought it back with me into Ungated. Like I now realize that courage is the core value, is like
Mm.
the centerpiece of everything that I'm talking about on
Mhm.
Ungated. Um, because like all these things that we're talking about is like operating from a place of love, breaking free from best practices, doing
Mhm.
creative work that nobody else but you could do, like subverting the status quo in ways
Yeah.
that feel meaningful, like and operating from the bottom up instead of the top down. Like all of these things require courage. They require that leap of faith.
Absolutely.
Um, and another one of those things is courage to be vulnerable, right? Is to share those things that feel uncomfortable. And so like
Right.
that's what that article was for me. And like it's a story I've been sitting on for a year. Um, because like my like the long story of this is, or the short story, I guess, is that I made some changes in terms of how I approach my relationship to eating and food that then translated into how I approach marketing and business and life.
Right.
But what I essentially did in that article was just come out and say that like I have a really shitty, abusive, addictive relationship to food. Like, you know, some people
Mhm.
they turn to sex or screens or TV or smoking or drinking or whatever. Like we all have those things that we turn to run away from the things that we don't want to feel.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, it's always been food. Like it's been that way since I was a kid. It's been one of those
Mm.
things that I carry like a great deal of shame around. Like I
Yeah.
remember like even as like a, I don't know, like a 10 or 12-year-old or whatever, just like sneaking out into our garage to where the freezer was and like eating the ice cream sandwiches that we had out there and then like feeling really guilty. It's like it's a whole thing that I've just been kind of carrying for years. And it really, really got bad over the course of my 20s, um, as I kind of isolated myself. And it kind of ties into like this, you know, me having like a lot of bad feelings around like when I was writing for that filmmaking site, when I was building
Yeah.
my own business.
Yeah.
Um, it led me to just relentless eating, like eating just copious amounts of stuff because I was just in like a constant state of feeling like shit about everything, about
Mhm.
where I was, the type of work I was doing, about like all these things. And then obviously that compounds into
Yeah.
gaining a lot of weight and feeling extraordinarily self-conscious about my body, about my image, about my romantic prospects, and having like that shitty self-worth then ripples out into how I think about business and my
Mhm.
marketing and all of my relationships and friendships and all of these things. Like it got me to a really, really dark place. And like food is that was it like at the root of it. Like it was
Yeah.
always the thing that started the downward spiral. So for years and years and years and years, I tried all of the things that one does. Like there's an entire multi-billion-dollar industry of
Yeah.
like, here's how to fix yourself. It's just try keto. Just go do CrossFit 7 days a week. Just hire a nutritionist. Just do whatever. Like
Yeah.
there's so much, and most of it is based on rigid top-down rules, like
Mhm.
rigid moralistic top-down rules of like everything in this category of food is good, everything in this category is bad, and you are a bad person if you eat these things.
Mhm.
um and I would always do these things. I discover a new paradigm, a new plan, a new something. Like I was always seeking novelty, seeking that next thing that would finally save me.
Mhm.
um I'd get really excited, be like, finally I found the thing, do it for 2 to 3 weeks, feel pretty good, but then run into a shitty day. Like
Mhm.
something would happen. I'd get a bad email. I don't know, I'd just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and there'd be just exactly zero willpower. There'd be a part of
Yeah.
me that just had to rebel against all of these restrictions that I had been putting on myself, that then started all of these patterns over and over. And I got really kind of fatalistic, really hopeless with it, really just kind of resigned to the fact that this pattern would always dominate my life in some capacity, and doubted my
Mhm.
ability to break free from it because I literally tried everything, like all of the
Mm.
things. Um, but the thing is like they were always like external solutions. Like everything started from a belief that I wasn't to be trusted at my core,
Yeah.
and that I needed something on the outside to control myself.
Yeah.
And it was working. And I tell this story in the article, but like I was working with Michael Ashcroft as a coach, and he asked this question of, what if you didn't need any of these fancy external systems or solutions? What if you didn't need to put crazy amounts of pressure on yourself and be so rigid with what's right and wrong? And what if you just trusted yourself to make the right decision? And the question just kind of like blew up my entire conception of everything. It's wild how one question can do that. Um, but that's what essentially like started me down this path of non-coercion.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I don't know how deep you want to go into this in regards to like what it actually means, but fundamentally it's built on that question that you are already trustworthy.
Yeah.
At your core, you already know what to eat, how to act, what the moral thing is to do, what the right thing is to do, what the best next step for you in life is, like coming back to a lot of this
Yeah.
like bottom up stuff. I believe that we have those answers within us, and that we are trustworthy if we believe that we are, and
Yeah.
that will lead us to good places. But specifically in this context of food, where that led me was, basically this concept of intuitive eating, of this
Mm.
idea that your body is like this very, very intelligent, beautiful system that is always giving you data about what feels good, about what doesn't, about what gives you energy and makes you feel vibrant and alive, and what makes you feel shitty and sluggish and gross. And
Mhm.
like, if you just listen and do the things that feel good, you will be healthy as like a downstream emergent effect of that.
Yeah.
Is just stop doing the things that feel bad. And like, it requires so much trust in yourself to actually do that. But I've been working on it for the better part of a year and building trust with myself, because it's
Mhm.
not, I don't think it's just like a decision
Yeah.
that you can make, especially after like
Yeah.
15 years of not trusting yourself. Like, it takes
Yeah.
a while to repair that relationship,
Yeah.
but increasingly it works. And I worry less about food than I used to. And even if I have a shitty day and eat some like too much stuff, like, it's broken that pattern of shame and that
Mhm.
pattern of constantly spiraling out of control and feeling
Yeah.
out of control of my life, because I know that I can come back to something stable and solid,
Yeah.
which is the self that's, and I don't know, it's not like I fully love myself, fully trust myself, have fully healed my relationship with food yet, but this sort of non-coercive intuitive path is the thing that has
Yeah.
done more for me in that. And like, I can always feel it healing, like it's a constant healing process and it's
Mhm.
working.
Yeah.
um and I've been talking a while, but then that translated to like how I thought about marketing. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that was a very beautiful and thoughtful answer, and yeah, you gave me a lot of think, and it's so funny because and you just say it requires a lot of trust, and it's so funny because I'm so used to hearing that it requires a lot when talking about a bad habit. I usually hear the sentence, it requires a lot of willpower, but you're fundamentally changing the paradigm by saying it requires a lot of trust, not willpower, because willpower comes from a place where you don't like what you're doing, and so you're pushing against the wall and you're pushing and you're pushing, and what you're saying is completely different. What you're saying is it takes a lot of looking inside and self-love and saying and almost like looking yourself in the mirror and saying, "Look, you got this. I trust you." Right? And it's. Have you read? Because you I don't know, but that book just popped out in my mind. Have you read Kamal Ravikant's "Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It"? Yeah,
yeah, a couple times.
it does remind me a lot of that process of just embracing who you are and understanding that you're already full, you're already complete, and you can do that. And it's so fun because like you're, and I know, and we'll get into marketing if that's what the conversation asked for, but your the intuitively eating, it's almost like you can replace like the eating for any bad habit, right?
Yeah.
As long as you have the intuitively before, because that's the major change. Right now you're not seeing having a bad day or eating a specific meal as something bad. It's no longer it's almost like you're not processing that as a failure anymore. It's just something that happens. And okay, so let's go back. It's like slowly drift back your attention who you are to yourself. And of course, I'm talking about you, but in my mind, I'm talking about myself, not about food.
Yeah.
But like we all have, like you say, we all have our own um, like Achilles heel, right? Like that, those specific things that have some impact on us. And so thank you for that answer. Because it really made me think, and I'll need to act upon it. And one of the things that, just going a little bit back, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I do want to say this, like, that what you're saying, it takes a lot of courage, right? And you're talking about how courage is the core value of what you're doing, and we can all get more courage, yeah, if everyone around us is operating on the edge, and we're supporting each other. And I'm bringing that up again because I truly believe that we can do an awesome job helping others, encouraging others to do other things. And let me, I'll just want to say this, which is, like, I sent you the link for the Zoom conversation, and your reply was full caps, "Let's go," like with a bunch of O's around, and you have no idea how, like, the amount of courage and just calm and I don't know how to express it, but like it made me feel really good, you know. And in fact, I was just recording before we started. I was just talking with my girlfriend now, and I was just sharing that. Like, look, I just sent the link to Rob, and his reply was, "Let's go." And now I'm really hyped because I know he's hyped. Like, and sometimes people think about, like, we can, that is almost, well, I want to encourage others and I want to help others, and we need to do all these big things. But sometimes the only thing that we need to do is just send a DM in full caps, and that will be enough, right? And I truly believe that, and this is my conclusion. Like, I truly believe that we can apply that not only to others but to ourselves. Like, sometimes all we need to do in order to promote self-love is to do, like, it's to say, send a message, a DM saying, "Let's go," to ourselves. It's small things. We don't need all these big changes, right? And that's why I don't know. I'm just rambling too right now.
Dude, I love all of that
Yeah.
so much. I have a couple of thoughts. One is this idea that encouraging somebody is like, it's like it takes no energy, basically. It takes no time out of your day. It takes almost nothing, but it can change the course of somebody's life.
Absolutely.
It can just start them on an entirely new track. And like, plus it feels good. It feels good to be encouraging, to be enthusiastic, to be friendly in the world. To, again, and it kind of comes back to a lot of the self-trust stuff. Is like, you kind of have to not be in a total place of scarcity and think that everybody's like, I don't know, that playing like zero-sum games. So there is something there, but I don't know. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, the more encouraging I am and enthusiastic and friendly and whatever, like, the better my life gets, the better I feel, the more friends I make, it all just contributes to this. I don't know, to the, like, again, and the other thing I was going to say is, like, this courage thing ties beautifully into the new golden age, the modern golden age. Yeah. Like, for us to get from where we are right now, which is kind of a I don't know, our status quo is shitty in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And for us to get from here to there, it's going to require so much courage. It's going to require people breaking out of old ways of being and making those leaps of faith into something that is new and uncertain.
Yeah.
And like, that's the thing, right? Is if courage is contagious, like, that's the thing that gives me hope, is like, if I can constantly step out of my comfort zone, which I'm getting addicted to it, by the way. That's the other thing, is like, I'm starting to trust that stepping out of my comfort zone and doing those things that I'm afraid of or that I find really uncomfortable, it actually leads me to feeling good and feeling alive and all of that. Like, so that's an interesting thing. But when I do it, it it provides a model in the world, and like it
Mhm.
inspires other people to go a little bit further, and then they're going to inspire, and it's this bottom up thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a, I don't know, man. Like I don't know exactly where I'm going, other than
I
I
know,
I
but
am so hyped
yeah.
about spreading courage. Like,
Yeah, and it's funny because when you said like, I think that to Ungated, like the core value, courage is the core value. That struck something in my own mind, and it's funny because we're having insights in real time in real conversation. That's actually something in my mind, which is, yeah, I do believe that all of the principles that I believe we need to embrace in order to bring a modern golden age start with having the courage, start with courage, like the courage to be yourself, the courage to love yourself, the and yeah, it makes total sense. Like besides having, let's just riff a little bit on that. Like besides having a group of people that are all operating on the edge of what's comfortable to them. And besides being on a group where people are constantly being courageous and going beyond their own limits, like what are other things that you believe we can do to promote courage?
hmm, that's a good thing. I like, so I think like there's an idea from the Greeks about this idea of a daimon. It's this kind of like a guiding spirit, basically, like the ideal, not the idealized version. It's the best version of yourself that lives within you. Kind of like there's a daimon is a good and demon is
Mm-hmm.
bad,
Mm-hmm.
is maybe the way of thinking about it. But basically, it's this idea that there's this inner voice that knows what your potential is, that knows who you can be, that knows when you're on the right track and when you're on the wrong track. And it comes back to this idea of intuition and sort of listening to what's there in the stillness and where it's pointing you. But more and more, I think like for me, like the courage comes from like being like listening to that thing, like trusting that whatever that thing is pointing me somewhere useful. And
Mm-hmm.
then it always points me out of my comfort zone to doing something that is just like, oh, I don't know that I really want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
um, but then it's doing that thing, and again then that reinforces this self-trust thing.
Yeah.
And I guess I just think that like that voice is there for everybody. Like I don't have any data to back that up, like I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think it's there for everybody. And I think it's pointing all of us at different things. Like
Mm.
something that's really uncomfortable for me, I don't know, like there's a bunch of people that I know who think ecstatic dance is like fun and wild and enjoyable, while I was over here being like, oh dog, that's the scariest thing I can imagine. So like, but their daimon, their capital S self, however you want to describe it, probably is like pointing them towards something in their lives that is really really hard and
Scary.
uncomfortable that they're
Yeah.
avoiding. um, and so I think like that's like the underlying meta pattern that I want to
Mm.
call out, is that I think we all have different comfort zones. We all have different areas that we need to go into for growth that are going to be, yeah, that are going to be challenging and uncomfortable and scary.
Yeah.
Um, and then that's kind of like the underlying thing, or like the underlying pattern that we need to sort of champion,
Yeah.
is to go where the discomfort is, to make that a cultural norm. Because I think that's like that's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah.
That's where we start collectively growing. That's where we all start becoming who we can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that making the cultural norm, embracing the uncomfortable is it's yeah, that's a very good principle to have.
Mm.
uh and Rob, I believe that that's actually a very good way for us to wrap up the conversation. Like there's so many things here. I'll definitely will re-listen to our conversation and try to process a bunch of things. But before we go, I just wanted to ask you, like, if people want to connect with you, to know more about you and your work and what you're doing, tell us where they can find you.
We're gonna have to have a part 2, man. I feel like
Yeah,
there's so
absolutely.
much more.
Absolutely.
So the best place for, like, obviously some of this businessy golden age stuff that we're talking about is on Ungated, which you can find at ungated.media. Eventually, actually, within a week or two, none of my courses are going to be available for individual sale anymore. It's all just going to be under the membership. But like for people who want to get into the Oasis course or any of the others that I've built, like that's the place for that. But probably the best place is just Twitter, where I'm increasingly weird and vocal and just kind of like shit posting instead of really caring about marketing practices or any of that. Like it's where I go to just kind of have fun and hang around interesting people and have conversations. And on there, I'm Ungated Creative.
Yeah,
those are the places.
Yeah, we'll definitely post the links on the description, and we'll definitely are going to have like a part 2, for sure. Right, Rob. I just wanted to thank you, for real, and not only thank you like for the conversation in the podcast, but like for sharing everything that you did, like not only at the professional level but as a personal level as well. Like I'm really grateful that we had this conversation, and to everyone that's listening, please go follow Rob and show some love and some encouragement, because he's a very awesome dude, as you just witnessed. And so, Rob, once again, thank you so much. And for everyone listening, if you like the podcast, you can consider subscribing it at your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Rob, once again, thank you so much.
Huge thank you, man. This was an absolute blast.
Yeah.